But during the Industrial Revolution, so we're going to start off way in the beginning of time, we started to create systems that we were able to use to document, sorry, I'm just moving a chat around, document productivity of humans alongside machines so that we would be able to better understand how to get better, more productive, and get to the end result faster. Then during World War II, we created a process, or the military created a process of a merit system that enabled us to be able to get rid of poor performers, which in the end enabled us to more move these people, and this is the sad part, but move these people to the front lines during battle. Then we move on to World War II. And during World War II, we started to say, okay, how can we reinforce the process of identifying this type of merit system? How can we reinforce the process of identifying high performers or identifying soldiers that had potential to become officers? Then, still staying in the 1940s, we take a look at really understanding how do we reinforce this positive behavior of a system that we're starting to implement in the Army during war. And organizations started to adapt this process and create systems around being able to document performance, to allocate rewards, and really create benefits for high performers. We jump forward to the 1960s and GE comes into play here. And GE said, with the system that had been running for the last 20 years, GE says that this is now an opportunity that we can leverage to help use as a development tool. So let's better utilize it so that we can help grow our people, to help lower turnover. We recognize that a high-performing organization is one that keeps their people for a very long time. And this is at a stage where it's the end of the Eisenhower era, and employees were really noted as company men as far as staying with organizations for the lifetime of their career. Then we jump forward another decade and we look at the 1970s, and inflation starts to rise. And what happens is organizations start to not really be able to afford compensation or merit pay increases for all of their employees. So they need a way to be able to objectively understand, how do we have a focused process where we can only provide merit increases to certain people, which become our high performers, and we really start to lean into a performance rating score. In the next decade, in the 1980s, good old GE took another stab at the process and said, let's take it one step further and let's award only our top performers. We're going to keep our employees that are middle ranked from a performance rating perspective, and we're going to let go all of our low performers. And this is how we see a high performing organization to really sustain itself, is by cycling out low performers and bringing new people in. But then we fast forward another 20 years and we look at the turn of the century, and organizations start to become flatter as a trend. Organizations, to me, I often look at them depending on their maturity level, and often it doesn't matter how long they've been established, but more often than not, I sometimes view organizations like teenagers, in that they love to follow a trend. So when one organization raises their hand and says, okay, we've been really successful at being flat, and here's how we did it, everybody else wanted to learn how to follow suit and said, okay, that's something we need to do too. But what happened with larger organizations as they started to flatten their hierarchy is our really good managers started to take on a lot more direct reports. So we're looking at a process where we're leaning into this performance rating, and it's starting to become even more cumbersome than it originally intended to be. And it's something that we're just not really falling in love with. Then we go into the 2010s and Agile hits the scene. But I will admit to you, Agile's been around long before 2010. But it becomes a trend where we're understanding a different way of working, and we're starting to apply the concept outside of just product engineering and technical teams to different parts of organizations. And the pot really starts to boil because now we're looking at outcomes and end results processes differently. And process becomes of annual performance reviews become even a bigger tax for managers within organizations and HR departments. Basically, what this timeline is telling us in a nutshell is since the 1700s, we've really just all been trying to figure it out. We're all trying to understand, how do we get to a place of something that people enjoy, that works for us, that enables us to drive performance and growth. Our end result ultimately is to have high performing people so we can be a high performing organization. The problem has been that we've all been staring at the outcomes and not necessarily putting enough tension on the fundamentals or the behaviors in achieving those outcomes. And I'll give you an example. It was because this is what I can relate to. As a child, I played the piano for decades. So it would be as if I was a conductor, let's just say, of an orchestra, and you're coming in as a piano player on my orchestra, and I say, are you ready to go? We're going to be playing in a symphony. Here's a sheet of music I'd like for you to play. And you're like, great, I've got it. I studied piano as a kid. I learned it in school, or learned it as a kid, studied it in school. I've had a piano teacher before. I know how to read music. I know what I'm doing. And I say, okay, that's awesome. I'm, minus your audition, I'm going to trust, and we're going to make this thing happen and make this thing work. And I'm so sorry, I just got a puppy. So we're going to have to talk through the barking. So outside of that, what I wouldn't do. So if I'm now listening to you and preparing for you to play within the symphony inside of the orchestra, what I wouldn't do is continue to rank you or mark you as a mediocre performer that's not necessarily exceeding expectations. I think that is something that we call the definition of insanity, where we're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But in order for me to be able to help you improve, instead, what I need to do is focus on those fundamentals instead of the outcomes of the music. That's one data point. But instead of me telling you you're not hitting the mark, what I need to do is sit down and coach you on maybe how to play a little bit differently, fix your tempo, fix the order in which you are reading or playing that music. Because maybe there's something that you're just not seeing that I would be able to help teach you with.